Sometimes the most dangerous storms are the ones that brew silently behind a calm and smiling face. Explore the hidden tensions and the explosive conclusions of life's most difficult and intense internal battles. Subscribe now and stay tuned for the lightning strike in our next video.
The invitation came in a group text, which should have been my first warning. Mom's turning 80 in December. We're doing a big party at the house. Claire, you're local so you'll handle setup. Love you all. That was it. No question mark. No, is that okay with you? Just a statement of fact from my brother Daniel, sent at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, as if assigning me a work task he'd already forgotten about by morning. I stared at my phone in the break room of Millfield Elementary, where I'd been teaching 3rd grade for 6 years. My lunch, a sad turkey sandwich I'd made at 6 a.m., sat untouched beside me. I read the message 3 times. Then I typed back, "Sure, happy to help. What's the plan?" Nobody replied for 2 days. I am 31 years old. I live 20 minutes from my mother's house in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is apparently both my greatest qualification and my greatest curse. My brother Daniel is 43, lives in Seattle, and works in commercial real estate. My sister Renee is 38, lives in Charlotte with her husband Paul and their 2 kids, and has made an art form out of being too busy to do anything that isn't glamorous. I am the youngest. I am the local one. And for as long as I can remember, that combination has meant I am the one who handles things. I handle the things that don't get photographed for anyone's Instagram. I handle the plumber when Mom's pipes freeze in January. I handle the pharmacy runs when her blood pressure prescription needs refilling. I handle the calls from her neighbor, Mrs. Aldridge, who phones me, not Daniel, not Renee, when Mom's car has been in the driveway for 3 days without moving and she's worried. I don't say this to sound like a martyr. I say it because it matters for what comes later. Mom turned 80 on December 14th. The party was December 21st, chosen because, as Renee explained when she finally called me back, it gives everyone time to travel after the holidays wind down and flights are cheaper in January if we go right after. I pointed out that December 21st was 4 days before Christmas. Renee said, "Exactly, so it works perfectly." I started planning in October. I called the caterer. I called the florist. I drove to Mom's house 3 Saturdays in a row to measure the dining room, figure out where the rental tables would go, decide whether the backyard could hold a tent if the weather was bad. Mom sat at the kitchen table during these visits and watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something between gratitude and something else, something quieter. "You don't have to do all this yourself," she said once, in November, while I was on hold with the rental company. "It's fine," I said. "I've got it." She looked at me for a long moment. "I know you do," she said. "You always do." I thought it was just something mothers say. I filed it away and went back to being on hold. Daniel flew in on December 20th with his girlfriend Stacy, who I'd met once at Thanksgiving 3 years ago and who had very strong opinions about floral arrangements. Renee and Paul arrived the same afternoon. By the time I got to Mom's house that evening, after a full day of teaching, after stopping to pick up the custom cake I'd ordered 6 weeks in advance, after dropping off the extra folding chairs I'd borrowed from the church hall, the living room was full of people drinking Mom's good wine and talking about a ski trip they were planning for February. Nobody had unpacked the centerpieces I'd left in boxes by the door. "Oh, we were going to do that," Renee said when I started opening boxes. She did not get up from the couch. I set up the centerpieces. I arranged the catering delivery schedule for the next morning. I confirmed the florist's arrival time. I triple-checked the rented tablecloths against the list I'd made in October. At 10:30, while everyone else had moved on to talking about Paul's bonus and Daniel's new condo, I was in Mom's kitchen making a timeline for the next day on a yellow legal pad. Mom came in around 11. She poured herself a small glass of water and stood at the counter watching me write. "Go to bed, Claire," she said. "Almost done." Claire. Her voice was gentle but firm. The voice she used when I was 7 and stayed up reading under the covers with a flashlight. Go to bed. It will still be there in the morning. I went to bed. The party was beautiful. I say that not to brag, but because it's relevant. Because it was beautiful and it ran exactly on time and the caterer complimented my logistics. And 43 of Mom's friends and family members came through that door, and every single one of them told her it was the loveliest party they'd attended in years. The flowers were white and gold. The cake had a photograph of Mom at 25 transferred onto the frosting in edible ink, the one where she's laughing at something off camera, and her whole face is lit up. She cried when she saw it. Daniel gave a toast. He talked about growing up, about Mom's cooking, about a fishing trip he and Dad took before Dad passed. It was a good toast. He'd written it on the plane. I found out later. Renee organized a slideshow on her laptop. She'd asked me for photos in November and I'd sent her 47 of them, organized by decade. She picked 12 and added a song. Everyone said it was lovely. I refilled the water pitchers and made sure the caterer's staff knew where to put the extra napkins. Afterward, when the guests had gone and the rental company had come for the tables, the 4 of us sat in Mom's living room. Me, Daniel, Renee, and Mom. And ate leftover cake straight from the box. Mom looked tired in the way people look after something they've been waiting for a long time finally happens. This was perfect, she said, truly. Daniel stretched his arms above his head. We pulled it off. I looked at him. He looked it off. I looked at the ceiling, satisfied. I ate my cake. The next morning, December 22nd, I came by to help Mom with the cleanup. Daniel and Renee were at the kitchen table with their coffees, talking about Christmas plans. I learned, while washing dishes, that both of them were leaving on Christmas Eve. Daniel was taking Stacy to her family in Portland. Renee and Paul were doing a ski trip with another couple. Apparently the February trip had been moved up. They'd be in Colorado from Christmas Eve through New Year's. That's great, I said. Who's staying with Mom for Christmas? A pause. She'll be fine, Renee said. She's not helpless. She's 80 years old, and she had hip surgery 8 months ago. She lives alone. Claire. Daniel set down his coffee mug. You're right here, and you don't have any big plans. I had plans, actually. I had plans to drive to Nashville and spend Christmas with my best friend Jess, whose apartment I'd been looking forward to for weeks. Jess made tamales on Christmas Eve. We watched old movies. It was the kind of Christmas I actually looked forward to. I looked at Mom. She was looking out the kitchen window at the backyard. She didn't say anything. Fine, I said. I texted Jess that night. She said, "Oh Claire, again?" I didn't know what to say to that, so I sent her a heart emoji and put my phone down. Christmas morning, Mom and I had coffee on the back porch, even though it was 41 degrees. Because she said she liked the cold air. I'd brought her a heated blanket. She was wrapped in it like a cocoon, both hands around her mug. And she looked at the bare oak trees in her backyard with that same expression I'd been noticing all fall. The quiet one. The one I couldn't name. Tell me something honest, she said. About what? About how you're doing. I thought about the honest answer for a moment. The honest answer was that I was tired. Not physically, or not only physically, but tired in the way you get when you've been useful for so long that you can't remember the last time someone asked you what you wanted. The honest answer was that I'd been eating lunch alone in a school break room for 6 years. That I'd missed Jess's tamales. That I'd spent 10 weeks planning a party where my name appeared nowhere in any toast. And that I wasn't entirely sure my family would notice if I stopped answering my phone. I'm fine, I said. Mom looked at me. She had brown eyes that hadn't faded much with age. Still sharp, still attentive in a way that made you feel observed. You know, she said, when your father was dying, it was you who came every day. Not Daniel, not Renee, you sat with him. She paused. He knew that. I didn't say anything. I looked at the oak trees. I know that too, she said. I want you to know that I know. We sat there until the coffee was cold. Then I went inside and made us both breakfast, and Mom watched from the kitchen doorway, and neither of us said anything else about it. January came. I went back to school. I didn't hear from Daniel for 3 weeks, which was normal. Renee texted me a photo of herself on a ski slope in Colorado on New Year's Day. Sunglasses, bright jacket, big smile. I liked the photo because I didn't know what else to do with it. In February, Mom had a fall. It wasn't serious. She slipped on the bathroom tile in the morning. Bruised her hip. Didn't break anything. But she couldn't get up on her own, and she called me before she called anyone else. I left school during my planning period, drove 20 minutes in traffic, found her sitting on the bathroom floor with remarkable composure, reading a magazine she'd dragged off the toilet tank. "I knew you'd come fast," she said. I helped her up. I drove her to the doctor. I waited in the waiting room for 2 hours and took notes on what the doctor said about fall prevention, and made an appointment for a follow-up. I put grip tape on the bathroom floor that weekend, and moved her bedroom rug, and ordered a shower handle from Amazon. I called Renee to let her know what happened. She said, "Oh no, poor Mom, keep me posted." I called Daniel and got his voicemail. He texted back 4 hours later, "Thanks for handling it." Thanks for handling it. I stared at that text for a long time. In March, Mom asked me to come over on a Sunday. She said she wanted help reorganizing the back bedroom, the one that had been Dad's office and hadn't been touched in the 4 years since he died. I drove over expecting boxes and dust. Instead, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table with a man I'd seen once before, at the party, her attorney, a quiet man named Mr. Forsyth, who shook my hand and asked if I wanted coffee. I looked at Mom. She looked back at me with the calm of someone who has been carrying a plan for a long time and has finally decided to put it down. "Sit down, Claire," she said. "There are some things I want to explain to you myself, before any paperwork makes it feel official and cold." I sat down. Mom had sold the florist shop she'd run for 22 years in 2019, 4 years before the party, for $1.8 million. She had told us it sold for a decent amount, and that she was comfortable, and none of us had pressed for details because, I see this clearly now, Daniel and Renee assumed comfortable meant modest, and I hadn't asked because it genuinely hadn't occurred to me that it was any of my business. I wasn't thinking about what I might receive someday. I was thinking about whether she had enough for her prescriptions and whether the furnace needed replacing. Between the sale proceeds and the investments Dad had left, and property in Hopkinsville that had been in Dad's family for 3 generations, Mom's estate had grown to approximately $3.2 million by the time she sat me down at that kitchen table. "I've been watching for a long time," Mom said. She folded her hands on the table. "I have 4 years of watching and 20 more before that. And I know who shows up. I know who showed up when your father was sick. I know who planned my party. I know who was on that bathroom floor with me in February." Mr. Forsyth was quiet. Mom looked at me steadily. "I changed my will in November," she said. "Before the party. I want you to hear it from me." She walked me through it plainly, the way she'd always done things. No drama, no announcement. Just the facts laid out clearly like items on a grocery list. Daniel and Renee would each receive $150,000. That was generous, she said, and she meant it kindly, and she wanted me to understand it wasn't punishment so much as honesty. The Hopkinsville property. 17 acres and a farmhouse that had been appraised at $40,000 would come to me outright, and the remainder of the estate, after expenses and the 2 disbursements, would be held in a trust with me as the primary beneficiary. "The house is yours too," she said, "when I don't need it anymore. I want you to have a home that's yours." I couldn't speak for a moment. "Mom," I finally said, "you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said. "That's the point. I'm choosing to." Mr. Forsyth gave me a copy of the relevant documents to review and left us alone. Mom and I sat at the kitchen table for another hour. I asked her why she hadn't told me sooner. She said she'd been waiting until she was sure I wasn't doing any of it because of money, And by November, she was sure. Because nobody plans a caterer timeline on a yellow legal pad at 10:30 at night, for inheritance reasons. You do it because you love, she said. That's rarer than you think. I drove home that afternoon in a daze. The Bradford pear trees on my street were blooming. Those messy, optimistic, short-lived blossoms that last about 10 days and make everything look briefly like something out of a painting. I sat in my car in my driveway for a while before going inside. I didn't tell anyone. Not Jess, not my coworkers. Not anyone. I went to school on Monday and taught my third graders long division and ate my lunch in the break room and felt, for the first time in a long time, a quiet that wasn't resignation. It was something else. Something I had to sit with for a while before I recognized it. It was peace. In July, Mom had a small stroke. She recovered well. Her speech was unaffected, her mobility mostly restored. But it was a warning, and we all knew it. She spent 3 weeks in a rehabilitation facility, and I visited every day after school. I brought her audiobooks she'd mentioned wanting to read and updated her on my class, and told her about the cardinal that kept appearing on my fire escape like it had moved in permanently. She laughed at the cardinal story every time I told her a new installment. Daniel flew in for one weekend. Renee came for 3 days. They were both kind, genuinely concerned, and I don't want to be uncharitable about that, but they both left before she was discharged, and I was the one who drove her home, who set up the medication reminder app on her phone, who stayed the first 3 nights to make sure she was managing the stairs. One night during those 3 nights, I woke up at 2 in the morning and heard Mom in the kitchen. I found her sitting at the table in her robe, not doing anything, just sitting in the dark. "Can't sleep," I said. "Getting old is strange," she said. "You spent your whole life accumulating things, people, memories, certainties, and then one by one they become uncertain again." She looked at me. "I'm glad you're here. I'm always here. I know." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "That's what I mean." I made her chamomile tea. She went back to bed. I sat in her kitchen for another hour, in the dark, listening to the house settle and breathe the way old houses do. Mom called a family meeting in September. She did it with a straightforwardness that I've come to understand as her truest quality. A phone call to each of us. A date. An instruction to come. Daniel and Renee assumed it was about her health. They arrived somber and prepared for bad news. I knew what it was actually about, and I made coffee. Mom sat them down in the living room and explained her decisions herself. She didn't let Mr. Forsyth do it. She sat in the armchair that had been hers for 30 years, and she told her oldest children, clearly and without apology, what she had decided and why. The silence when she finished was the kind that has texture. Renee said, "Mom, that's not fair." Her voice was careful, controlled, the voice she uses in professional settings. Mom said, "I know it doesn't feel that way. I understand that, but I've thought about fairness for a long time, and I've decided that fairness isn't always equal. It's proportional." Daniel didn't say much at first. He looked at me, not with anger exactly, but with something searching, like he was recalculating something. I looked back at him steadily. "You knew," he said. "Since March," I said. "And you didn't say anything." "It wasn't my thing to say." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You could have told us. Given us a chance to." He stopped. "To what?" I asked. I kept my voice gentle because I meant it gently. "To start coming around more? To suddenly be available?" I shook my head. Mom made her decision in November. Before the party. Before any of us knew. That landed. I watched it land. Renee asked Mom twice more to reconsider, in 2 phone calls over the following weeks. Mom's answer was the same both times, delivered in the same calm, certain voice. She had thought about it carefully. She stood by it, and she loved them both very much. I didn't speak to Daniel for about 6 weeks. When he finally called, it was a Sunday evening and I was grading reading comprehension quizzes. He didn't apologize exactly, but he said, "I've been thinking about Dad's last year." A long pause. "You were there every day?" "Yes," I said. "I wasn't." "No." Another pause. "I told myself I was too far away. That it made more sense for you to go. That it was logistically easier." He was quiet. "I think I just didn't want to watch him decline." I put down my pen. "I know," I said. "And I did know," I said. "And I did know. I'd known for years. Grief makes cowards of the best people, sometimes." And Daniel wasn't a bad person. He was a person who'd learned he could leave the hard things to the person who'd always stayed. "I'm sorry," he said. "For the party. For Christmas. For all of it." "Okay," I said. We talked for another hour. It wasn't a transformation. People don't transform in a single phone call. And I wasn't looking for one. But it was something. A beginning of something honest. Which is the only kind of beginning worth having. Mom is still in her house. She had a good winter. Fewer falls, a new hip specialist she likes. A water aerobics class at the Y on Tuesday and Thursday mornings that she has started describing as the highlight of her week. She texted me a photo from the pool last week, her and 3 women her age, dripping wet, squinting into the sun. All of them grinning like teenagers. I have started looking at the Hopkinsville property. I drove out there on a Saturday in October, just to see it. The farmhouse, the old fence line. The way the light came through the trees in the afternoon in that particular slanted way that only happens when the leaves are about to turn. I sat on the front steps for a long time. I don't know exactly what I'll do with it yet. Maybe nothing, for now. Maybe something, eventually. A garden, maybe. I've always wanted a garden. Mom used to grow tomatoes when we were kids, in a bed along the south side of the house, and I used to steal them warm off the vine and eat them standing in the backyard like they were apples. The point isn't the inheritance. I want to say that clearly, even now, even having told you all of this. The point isn't the money or the farmhouse or the acreage or any of it. The point is that someone saw. After all those years of early mornings and pharmacy runs and caterer timelines and bathroom floors, someone was paying attention. Someone added it all up and said, "I see what you've been doing, and I see who you are, and I want you to know it wasn't invisible." My mother gave me that. She gave it to me before she gave me anything else. She gave it to me at a kitchen table on a Sunday in March, with the Bradford pears still bare and the coffee going cold between us, when she said, "I know who shows up. I know it was you." That's the part I'll keep forever. Everything else is just paperwork.